little bit of music of Johann Sebastian Bach, courtesy of Karl Stobbe from a brand new disc. You're listening to Winnipeg's Classic 107. My name is Simon Rustak. And of course, Karl Stobbe is a violinist who needs little introduction in these parts. Concertmaster, the Manitoba Chamber Orchestra, Associate Concertmaster, the Winnipeg Symphony. He's one of the nation's most accomplished violinists and a lover of all things pertaining to the instrument. His latest disc, Ysaye, J.S. Bach and Paganini Works for Solo Violin, released on the Leaf music label, highlights not only his outstanding playing, but also his admiration and fascination with the craft of luthiers. Joining me this morning on release date, no less, is Karl Stobbe. Welcome back to Classic 107, Karl.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here always, Simon.
And it's great to have you. Congrats on the disc. How does it feel to release it to the world?
Terrifying. Always, that never gets easier. I somehow am always scared about it.
But look, it sounds absolutely fantastic. And we were just chatting off air while listening to that wonderful recording of the Allemande from the Partita No. 1 in B minor. This is a project that goes back a number of years, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it goes back to the early parts of the pandemic even, when I was looking for things to do. And, we could play Bach, and we had this great large amount of music, almost 3 hours worth of music, I think, that Bach wrote for solo violin. And I thought, well, it doesn't require a pianist. I can be in my own room. I can be all by myself. And, there was this sort of symbolism about it being, it's titled, say, Solo, to be alone. And we all were. So I played Bach every day. And then I decided at some point, well, I should actually put on a series of online concerts. And so I recorded it. And I thought to myself, well, I should record it in such a way as that maybe eventually I can actually release it. And it turned out, I think when I started it, I was just happy to play. Mm-hmm. And when I finished it, I realized that the pandemic, as much as it took from us, it gave me this great experience of playing Bach every day for a year. I just would cycle through them. And then, of course, there's lots of other great music for solo violin, too, and I started incorporating that into it.
I want to chat more, and I want to go back even further in time, before the pandemic, when, some of us were trying to figure out how to bake sourdough, and you're over here working through the entire Bach catalog for solo violin. I was reading the liner notes that you so wonderfully prepared for this disc, and they're just so fantastic indeed. And you reference the piece that we just heard you performing, the Allemande, the opening movement to the Partita No. 1 in B minor, as the first work you played, or one of the first works you played, the first time you held a Stradivarius violin. You were 20 years old. You called it a confusing experience. Yeah. Can you tell us more about what you remember about that moment and what made it so confusing?
Well, I had played other good violins. Some people might say great violins, but this Strad I played was a great Strad, and I just didn't know what to do with it. It had all of this potential. These incredible colors, this incredible sound that it produced, in fact, incredible sounds that it produced, and a variety of sounds I had never experienced before on an instrument. And so I played, and I played the Bach, this Bach, and there was so much available to me, and I didn't know how to put it in. I had no idea what to do with all of that. It's sort of, if you're a race car driver, the first time you drive a Formula One car or something, all of a sudden you can do a lot. You can go really, really fast. And that's sort of how I felt about this Strad. I could just do so much with it, and I just didn't know how to use it.
Like you say, it's one of those relationships that you don't quite understand unless you're really in it, right? Like when you're so far entrenched, and you've spent hours and hours working to this point, and all of a sudden there's this instrument. And it's something that I've talked about with many of the great players that have come through town. We've had the opportunity to hear Stradivari and Guarneri's at the concert hall. There are just some incredible instruments, and those instruments can bring out more from the players, right? Yeah. It's a relationship that you know intimately well, not only as a player, but also as someone who has long admired the construction and mechanics of the violin. You took formal studies while you were completing your master's at Indiana. I'm curious, why do you think it was important to feature this relationship, not only as a player, but also as someone who's interested in the mechanics of the actual instruments themselves? Why was it important to feature this relationship on the disc and kind of make that the thrust of this album, the union between violinist and violin?
Well, I think when you make an album, especially an album like this one, which a lot of other people have done, you're trying to put your own spin on it, right? Mm-hmm. And I am deeply passionate about this stuff. I really love old instruments. I love new instruments. I love the violin as a piece of construction, as a piece of sculpture. And I shouldn't forget bows. Mm-hmm. I mean, they're remarkable creations in themselves, and they have a long, long history of great makers, of people who made it their job as artisans to perfect these things and find out what wood works the best, find out what wood works.
Yeah, there we go.
What wood works the best with different shapes, different forms. How does different ideas about it kind of come into reality on a workbench.
So let's chat about these three towering figures in the literature, especially when it comes to solo violin. And working chronologically, I want to start with the Bach. We just heard you performing a little bit of Bach's music. And typically when one thinks Bach, at least for me, you think of a fella sitting at an organ. But in the liner notes, you talk about how he was a very capable violinist in his own right, often found leading his musicians with a violin in hand. In contrast to that, Paganini, a name synonymous with the violin. This is the first time you've recorded any of his music. 3 selections from the Caprices, 9, 17, and 24. These are 3 of your personal favorites. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely.
What makes them special?
I think that musically they're incredibly wonderful. They're incredibly charming, and I mean, not that other ones aren't, but these ones, for me personally, they really go a great deal beyond just the technical exercises that they are. I mean, I think all the Paganini Caprices go beyond just being technical exercises, but these 3, for me, are just kind of extra charming, and they mean a lot to me. And I mean, number 9, I think, is the first one I ever played, and I just have loved it ever since.
Yeah, The Hunt, La Chasse in E major. It's so wonderful that you've committed these to recording, and wonderful to share them. And we're going to actually end this interview with a little bit of Paganini's music. But first, the last fellow on the disc is none other than Belgian great Ysaye. You've recorded all of his sonatas, Juno-nominated disc, your debut recording that came out a decade ago. Hard to believe it's been that long. That was 10 years ago, 2014, that album came out.
I hadn't considered that yet. It makes me feel older.
It makes me feel older too, because I'm like, that's your brand new recording. No. Here we are, years later. What was it like re-recording this Sonata number 4?
I don't know. It was sort of like the first time.
Yeah.
Intimidating. It's a lot of music. And actually, I did listen to the first recording that I made of it and thought to myself, okay, what do I like and what don't I like about how this went? So basically, what do I want to change? So I think you can hear it. It's different. It's on a different violin. And it's in a really different space. So, and I more or less did the recording myself. The first time I did it, Joe Dudich, a wonderful recording engineer, he basically did all the recording for me. This time, I asked Joe for some pointers, but it was the pandemic, right? I mean, I couldn't exactly have him over to do it, so I kind of did everything myself.
I also have reached out to Joe for pointers through the pandemic. He's just one of those go-to individuals and just a fantastic recording engineer that we have here in town. But you touched on one thing that I definitely wanted to get to. Since we've been talking so much about instruments, one big difference in terms of this recording and the past one that came out a decade ago is that there is a different instrument that you're playing. Can you tell us more about your current instrument, the one that you recorded these with?
My current instrument I've had for just under 10 years, I guess, probably. I think 8 years, probably 8 years right about now. I my wife and I had a week off together. We didn't know. It was 2 weeks beforehand or 3 weeks beforehand. We all of a sudden realized, oh, we both have this week off. That's kind of fun. I knew of a collection in San Francisco that I had a mutual friend with the collector, and my wife Stephanie and I decided, hey, let's go to San Francisco to see this collection. And she has an uncle and an aunt there, so we just kind of had a nice week together. And I went, and this guy had some absolutely amazing violins, and so he had arranged them in chronological order. I went in descending order, so sort of youngest to oldest, and I got stuck on this one. So it's made in 1806 by Nicolas Lupeau, really a very important violin maker. French. He's known as a French violin maker, but he's a very important violin maker, even apart from being French. It was made in Paris. As I said, 1806. I loved it. It was really love at first sight, or first playing, or whatever. First hearing.
Yeah, it was just love.
It was
love. Was in the room.
Yeah, and it was. I played it, and I said a few things that I can't repeat on radio, and I think my wife probably said some too. And we just had to kind of find a way to make it work. So it took a little finagling, but really, really, I haven't regretted it for a minute. It's been a great partner.
In what I've read, Lupeau known as the French Stradivarius. I mean, he's one of those makers who is right up there, right? And I mean, it's so wonderful that we have the opportunity in Winnipeg to hear you perform on this wonderful instrument. You'll be performing on it this weekend back with the WSO, and you've got rehearsal coming up today. So I probably should let you go. But Karl, I just want to congratulate you on this latest disc. It is a wonderful one. It is one that we are so looking forward to spinning regularly here on Winnipeg's Classic 107. On this release day, as I mentioned, we're going to hear a little snippet, another selection from the this in the case of Niccolo Paganini from the 24 Caprices, number 9 in E major La Chasse. Karl, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me. Great to be here.